make sure we've got everything retweeted before we jump into the show proper. Should probably create some kind of start screen. It wouldn't really be that difficult. But I keep playing this game here, waiting for all three services to catch up. And we are live. Welcome to another Monday morning tech chat show. The show what Monday morning tech geeks discuss. I see James Vincent already jumping in on the Periscopes. Thanks for joining the SGGQA podcast, James. We'll see some other people shortly, I'm sure, as we get this going on the Periscopes, the Twitches, and the YouTubes. We've got some fun news stories to talk about. This is actually a pretty late tech week from last week to this week. Farid joining on YouTube, saying, hey, Peter Hayton on Periscope. How's it going, guys? And Aditya Anil, hey Juan, good day. Good day, Aditya, good day. Yeah, pretty light tech week. Some exciting announcements as we're starting this just step into WWDC from Apple, the Apple Developer Conference, and then also Computex. So we're going to have a lot to talk about once we get to Newegg Now on Thursday. But for my own personal tech channel, we're going to be just kind of chilling. I'm probably not going to overlap too much with the WWDC keynote. And Kyle Ruggles is in, BearPod34, Mr. Juan, Jonky, what's up? I'm going to take a quick sip of water here. And the reason why I'm not going to stick too heavy to WWDC is, one, I'm not as into the developer conference news, and two, I'm way behind on finishing up some videos. So I'm going to blitz through some news. This hopefully will be a slightly more on the rails podcast than my normal 2-hour Ramblo-ramas. Is that? Yeah, we'll call them the Ramblo-ramas. And I've got to wrap up part of the housekeeping. I am still way behind on finishing up my LG G7 camera review. And so I actually have the editing window, my editing software up right now. I'm not going to be editing while we podcast, but as soon as I'm out, I'm going to be right back into cutting that video up because come hell or high water, that video will be out tonight. And I know I've been promising. I was really hoping to get it done over the weekend. Realized I was just a few more samples short, but wrapped everything up. I think I've got my commentary buttoned down, and it's definitely been an interesting look at LG strategy for photography and video this year. So I think it's going to be a fun video to check out. I think right now on the timeline, it's something like 22 minutes long. So it's going to be a 22-minute examination of the cameras. And one of the reasons why this G7 has taken me longer than many other camera videos that I've produced in the past. Actually, I mean, I can throw to my current folder here. Let me throw this up right here. So basically on the LG G7, for any camera review I shoot, I try and do multiple images. So just in normal mode, in auto mode, get some raw files from the manual modes. If there's any sort of specialty like a low light setting or an AI camera, that's all the buzz, all the fad this year. If it's shots of me in low light, then I also try and see if you can use the portrait mode under low light, because a lot of zoom sensor cameras can't. This is all just the low light night that I shot from right here. Trying to do some long exposures where you can see what these manual modes can do if you've got the phone set up on a tripod. And then I also try and capture some video samples under those same conditions too, where on the G7 we also now have a new HDR video mode. Then also, once I'm done collecting each one of those samples from that position, so normal photos, raw photos, HDR photos, specialty photos, video, HDR video, on the G7 I get to then go and do that all over again. So then I go and get to use the wide angle camera to try and recreate all of that. So every single individual photo setup that I take is roughly 8 minutes, sometimes 10 minutes of standing in that same spot, collecting different samples and then weeding out photos that I don't think really represent what I'm trying to capture there. And so that's in a humongous amount of media to capture. I filled up a 32 gig memory card and then went and threw another I don't know, I think 2 or 3 gig just on the main memory, the main storage on the phone. And I still had to go out and shoot over the weekend and collect a few more random samples. So that's a lot. That's a lot to chew through. That's a big storage to deal with, and then also to go through and look at those samples. So it's taken me a long time just to weed out, like, okay, this is showing off something that I think is important to talk about. This is a good example of something that I think is poor performance. This is something that I think is difficult to sort of discuss. And then also, it kind of goes hand in hand. Every time I do a camera review, what I'm trying to achieve is months worth of shooting. I'm really trying to touch on lifestyle, real-world conditions that you might encounter over weeks or months of owning the phone. So it's not just, I went outside on my front porch and I took a picture of this car and of this action figure and of a street scene. Like, that's not really testing the limits of the camera. Or also that this is all replicatable. So, you know, a lot of people will complain that my camera reviews start to look very similar. But if you put this G7 camera review up against my Galaxy Note 4 camera review from years ago, you'll see very similar shooting conditions, very similar locations, and you could directly compare on your own that output. So that's the housekeeping. Coming up today, Kyle Ruggles' next test shooting in snow. So one of the funny things about testing an AI camera is seeing how you can confuse it. And for the G7, if you like to take pictures of white flowers in daylight, according to the AI camera, I was shooting in snow. So there you go. I guess that's all I needed to do. A winter wonderland of bright summer shots of white orchids, I believe it was. So... Excuse me, I'm choking on my own spit there. That's good podcasting. Hold on, let me take a sip. So that will be out today. Patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. A 20-minute video, roughly 20-minute video. And we're really going to cover a lot of ground because there's a lot to talk about with the G7 and then also where it fits in. So if you were wondering, you know, like, should you go with the V30 or the G7? They seem really similar. I think I'll have some good answers for you folks as to what camera and what phone you should be focusing on. From Wilson Deng, did you see the LG G7 ad on TV? I have not. I'll have to try and look that up. Again, I'm always curious what LG puts out for commercials because they're usually terrible. Does the AI recognize wildlife in the darkness? So Aditya, when I'm using the G7, most of the time that AI is more trying to determine lighting conditions. It's not always... It's not always about trying to capture subject recognition. And I found the same thing was often true on the Huawei camera. So that Huawei AI setting, when the phone is scanning the scene, it's really impressive that it's doing this on device. It's not like it's having to take a clip, send that up to a server, get some kind of result. It's all on device. And more often than not, when you're on that device and you're scanning you're scanning the input from the camera, what it's trying to do is determine what's the most important thing to look at to change up the exposure and the post-processing settings. So if you're in great light and you have an identifiable subject like a dog, then it's going to say, okay, well, there are some things that we might want to manipulate here. When you're in poor light, the camera is basically saying, you're in poor light. It kind of doesn't matter what your subject is. We're going to try and work to brighten the scene up or expose for these types of highlights or try and balance this kind of contrast. So that right now seems to be the flavor of AI across most of the settings that I've used it on. AI with winter background sounds tricky. A winter background in general is really tricky. It's hard to shoot snow. I already missed who said that, the live chat from Bearpaw. Yeah, I don't shoot in snow a lot, but those exposure conditions with white reflective surfaces and you're trying to get some kind of image out of that is really tough. From Farid, will you check out the V35 too? As far as I know, the V35 doesn't seem to be radically different from the V30. So for now, I'm letting my V30 kind of stand as the commentary for the V35 until I see something appreciably different. I might try to revisit when I get a little bit of time in between some of these phones, like maybe after I've finished up my OnePlus 6 coverage and I've spent a little time. I am going to try and circle back to the P20 Pro. I think that's going to end up being one of the more important phone cameras of the year. What I might do is just a short, quick look at what changed on the V30 when we got the Oreo update. So that might be how I kind of balance that commentary. Fat Produce, how's the performance between the V30 and G7 wide-angle secondary cameras? I guess you'll just have to watch the review, man. You know, I can't give up everything here on the live chat. Can you really trust AI from BearPaw34, and how is it in dark backgrounds? That will be a major talking point in the AI section of my camera review. Huawei P10 Pro AI camera can detect snow scene perfectly. I don't know, and honestly, I can't test it, so I'll have to take your word for it. And from Ben Cherian, G6 after Oreo update review, please. I'm still waiting on my G6 to get that Oreo update, because what I want to do is I wanted to do a G6 versus G7. I really love that discussion of what phone manufacturers are more worth itness for a 1-year upgrade, because I feel for most of us enthusiasts, we like to cycle year to year, see what's new, see what's fresh, what's the new trend of that year. But it's rare that I find a phone that really feels like a good 1-year improvement. I think that's a really tough call for manufacturers. You know, are you really getting your money's worth if you're cycling your phone year to year? Whereas 1 to 3 years, that starts to feel like a substantial upgrade. And you've been using that phone longer. You've probably paid it off. You don't have that $20 to $50 add-on every month for your bill. And then you cycle into something new, and it feels like, wow, this is really impressive. So I'm holding off on that video until my precious little G6 does get that Oreo update. This is an AT&T unit, so I hope it's on track soon for getting that update pushed out. I'm going to butcher your name, and I apologize. From DJ Ja Estimata, any chance on reviewing the Zenfone 5's cameras? I am talking to Asus, but I'm talking to Asus about something that they just announced over the last day at a Computex. What I might do is tease them and say, like, hey, if I can get a hookup, I'm happy to cover some Zenphones, but I really want to talk about ROG and what they're doing for a gaming phone. So I'm hoping I can pull something like that off. But we'll be talking about that in just a little bit. DENL ROG exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Again, very interesting stuff in the world of gaming. In how we treat mobility products. And I think this is going to go into a larger conversation about what is a phone, what do we depend on a phone for, and what demographics are being left out that manufacturers could be courting. But I want to jump into some news, some quick headlines that I think we're going to just kind of blow through here real quick. This is still from the Reddit. I just get all my news off of Reddit. So, you know, if you're watching this podcast, if you just follow Reddit over a couple days before I do my podcast, then you'll probably glean what it is that I'm going to be talking about. But this is from Windows Phone, the Reddit Windows Phone. Bank of America is shutting down their Windows 10 mobile app at the end of July. If you boot up the Bank of America app on your Windows 10 mobile phone, you will be greeted with a message indicating the app will be shutting down at the end of the next month. This is a universal Windows Phone app, and the Windows 10 PC version will also be sunsetted at the same time, too. And then they included a screenshot where you can go to the online banking, or you can just hit OK and continue using the app. So, another just sort of a bit of evidence that Microsoft's strategy for mobile and trying to incorporate universal apps across all platforms, I feel like this could have had promise if they had stuck with this implementation and they had stuck with this earlier in the run of Windows, and especially earlier in the run of Windows Phone. If they had arrived there and not treated a phone platform like a desktop platform where it took multiple years to get updates and stuff, then I think that this would have been better off. In this current climate, where we are today, I'm actually not super negative on this move. What I really hope that we'll see all platforms migrating to is a return to the web browser, where if you have a feature-rich web service and you can make a universal web app and not leave any platform out in the cold, I would much rather have those progressive web apps than this continued metaphor that we use of collecting a bunch of tiny squares that install on our phones to do very focused bits of computing. It's the like realization of something like Chrome OS, where I don't think apps are really. I mean, it makes sense for something like a game, so we keep dedicated game installs around for something like that. But I'd much rather return to a desktop style computing metaphor for services, where I just have bookmarks in a browser, and I can turn that bookmark into a shortcut on my desktop or my app drawer, whatever it is that we're using right there. So I think that really should be the next push. So I'm not super upset that Bank of America is making this play. From Renato Laporte, 3 of the bigger Dutch banks also closed down their Windows Phone apps, but the mobile website is, he's doing the OK emoji, but it still misses some functionality like NFC payment or fingerprint authentication. Okay, so that's a good point. I'm not entirely sure how we work with that, but it would be nice if you could just have some sort of plug in directly into the operating system proper, where you can set a default through that. So you would have your face unlock or your fingerprint identification. You could tap to pay. And again, it doesn't necessarily need to be the same kind of app that we take for granted on Android or iOS. In some ways you look at like Apple's implementation or Apple's strategy, and that kind of makes sense, where it's just an Apple ecosystem setup. It is technically Apple Pay or whatever. I think it's Apple Pay, right? So that's the service, but it's kind of just built core into the OS. It's not really a separate payment processing service. That might get in the way of other things too, and we'll have to see if Microsoft can return to any kind of mobile strategy, because we keep seeing rumors on Andromeda devices or new modular bits to their operating system to Windows, or how we can tailor functionality to different devices. At the same time, we see hardware looking at Windows 10 support on ARM, which I've been prattling on about for a while too. So I think we can move on to the next one. I love this one from Goran Petrovic, though. That Laporte knows everything, and I mean that in a good way. I love the people who are having conversations on my live stream. And again, a lot of you guys know a lot more about things than I do, so keep that conversation going. From Sharil, but wouldn't secure connectivity for bank apps need native level security on the local OS on the device, or web service can pull features from Knox, etc.? I'm not saying that I have the perfect solution in terms of all of that security lockdown just yet, but if I can do a ton of banking in a web browser on my desktop and feel that that's a fairly secure platform for me to engage with my finances, I'm not sure why we couldn't do that on a phone. In fact, my phone as a whole is actually probably better secure than my desktop as a whole, where I just have a password going into my desktop. I have multiple methods of security that I can go into on my phone. I don't currently have any kind of Windows Hello, face unlock, or fingerprint scanning on my desktop. So again, it would require sort of a paradigm shift and a metaphor shift for how we interact with that, but if we're cool doing banking on a browser, I don't see why we wouldn't be cool doing banking on a browser on a phone. So we would have to figure out that last mile of how to complete a transaction. But after we get there, I mean, that doesn't sound to me like it's an insurmountable problem, especially if we're looking at progressive web app style services, where you do download a small piece of software, but it still runs primarily through the browser. And that would also give you some choice too. Like, I prefer the Firefox browser if I feel like that's a more secure or a better bucketed place to put my personal information, then I should also have that choice. As long as it connects to something on the phone, then it installs a little kernel of software. I can tap and pay and do all those things just like I would with any other app, only I don't have to install a ton of different apps to do that. I think that could be a huge benefit. Let me get this out of the way here. From Daniel Baccarat, we'll need open standards, not Windows Hello, Apple Fingerprint, and Google's implementation of the same. And I agree. That's where, actually what we'll probably force developers to do is just support every proprietary standard for security. I doubt we'll get to a point where Google, Apple, and Microsoft all agree on what platform security should look like. And in fact, that's actually probably better for security. But I digress. Let's move on to the next story this week. This one is hitting a little close to home because I am ridiculously excited for this, and I hope I'm actually actively looking at how I can maybe jump into to testing something like this. This is from the San Francisco Examiner. Driverless cars okayed to carry passengers in California, but companies can't charge for the ride. Only months after self-driving cars were given the okay by the DMV to test drive without drivers, another California regulator has cleared them to carry passengers. But there's a catch. While the California Public Utilities Commission voted to approve pilot programs for self-driving cars to carry passengers Thursday morning, that was a really long sentence, the commission nixed a proposal to allow those companies to charge passengers. So we're talking Waymo, Lyft, and anyone else that's trying to get into the driverless car game. I am so excited about this move, this development. In California, I think it's one of the perfect test beds for autonomous vehicles. I mean, if you can navigate in California, in San Francisco, LA, and markets like that, I think you'll do fairly well across the rest of the country. Then I think you'd have to have a separate pilot program for Boston. So for Massachusetts, some of the angriest drivers I've ever encountered on the roads. I see, like, I like East Coast drivers. They're more aggressive. They definitely point out what they're trying to do, and you're in their way. I don't enjoy the lackadaisical sort of passive-aggressive driving style in Los Angeles, where it's like, there's no one behind you, but I totally need to be in front of you right now, and I'm going 20 miles an hour slower than you. And they just sort of drift into your lane, no turn signal or anything. And then they all act like they're decent drivers because you slammed on your brakes to prevent the accident. So I'm reaching out to a couple different companies to see if I can take a test drive, or a test ride, I should say, in some of this gear, in some of these driverless cars. I am very positive on this move. It's going to be a huge shock and a major disruption to our economy. I seriously doubt our lawmakers are properly prepared for the fallout from self-driving vehicles, but I think there's so much potential here for improving the statistics on people who are killed in traffic accidents, for reducing the issues surrounding distracted driving, driving under intoxication. If we're worried about any of these sort of ills in society, I think one of the only solutions is to remove humans from the process of navigation. I think we're really bad at it. I think we've convinced ourselves that we're good at something that we're really bad at. And I think once a tipping point has been reached with a number of these vehicles on the roads, I think we'll see how much better machines are at this than humans are. Kyle Ruggles. Question is, would you ever feel comfortable not looking at the road while you're being driven? I wonder when that wouldn't be an issue for most folks. I mean, I don't have a problem looking at my phone when I'm in an Uber or a Lyft. I don't have a problem looking at my phone when I'm in a cab. I really don't see where, like, again, there's sort of this uncanny valley type fear of the unknown of a machine, but really that's no different. In fact, I'd much rather be I'd much rather be driven in a vehicle that I know is indefatigable, that isn't having a bad day, or isn't breaking up with its girlfriend, or isn't mildly intoxicated but functionally drunk or something like that. And I don't know that the driver has these issues or has these problems because they're a human being. I'd much rather there be some sort of universal standard of autonomous delivery. And I don't have this problem when I'm riding in a bus. And I don't have this problem when I'm on rails, like I'm riding in a subway. There are accidents on all of these different platforms too, but we don't question. You're like, oh, riding in a bus and the bus got hit by somebody, and how could you feel comfortable not looking at the road? So we'll have to see. For Sylvia on Twitch, what up, man? We suck at driving. Cannot wait to not have traffic. Hey, Sylvia on Twitch. This is a big deal. So I don't believe that self-driving cars are really going to alleviate much of the traffic burden in megapolis urban sprawl like Los Angeles. I think what we have to do is really get after employers in our state, especially in Los Angeles, to start incentivizing good employee behavior. If I were wearing my radical left communist, authoritarian communist cap, I would maybe start advocating for something like carbon taxing on employers, depending on how far their employees have to drive. So if you work in an office and you connect in a VPN and there's no reason for you to be in that office other than the employer has mandated that you have to come to the piece of real estate that they're leasing, then I think that that business should be taxed at the end of the year on how far their employees have to drive to meet that. Right? So then they could say, oh, well, that sucks. We'd have to spend a whole bunch more money, but you can still log in from home. So why don't you work from home 3 days a week and then come in twice a week and we'll schedule meetings for those 2 days a week? You know, like there's so many jobs in California that could be fully fulfilled by a cell phone, by a smartphone. Or, you know, like the combination of a smartphone and some kind of laptop for a larger screen if you really have to get into databasing or documents or something like that. There's so many jobs that require employees to do dumb crap, like drive hours in traffic to go to a building to then just sit in front of a computer that they could have sat in front of from home. So I kind of feel like not being punitive, but kind of being punitive, you know, if we want to fix the issue there. Sorry, short story, incredibly long. The Silver Ace on Twitch. She's a buddy of mine. She's doing some really cool work. She's actually one of our New Egg Ninjas, and she's got an amazing story where she wasn't allowed to play games as a kid, video games as a kid, and so she's gonna make up for that and actually broadcast that live. So she's gonna go and try and catch up on decades of gaming. So you should definitely check out her Twitch. Again, THESLS. Let's try that again. THESYLVERACE, the Silver Ace. And I don't believe self-driving cars are going to alleviate traffic, but they'll make me more productive in traffic, right? So if I don't have to focus all of my primate attention on operating a motor vehicle, and I can be sort of a co-pilot where I need to check in occasionally. I think it's going to be a little while before we've completely changed the narrative on just fully, like, we can redesign the car to be a living room. I think that might not happen in my lifetime. It will happen, but it might not happen while I'm alive to see it. But if I can reduce 80% of the attention that I need to pay on the roads, and the car can alert me to those 15 to 20% of the time it might need my input as the owner of the vehicle, then think about how much more productive or how much better rested or how much more relaxed I might be. The second you get into a car, you are in a high tension situation. Your body knows that you're traveling way fast, that this is a death trap, that one minor mistake could mean, catastrophic failure for your organism and other people around you, other people inside your car. So you're already at a 9. Even when you think you're being chill, relaxed, cool, groovy, whatever, your physiology is already at a heightened state of alertness and awareness. And so by the time you're done with your half-hour, 90-minute, 2-hour commute, the 2-hour commute is not unheard of in LA County. A 2-hour commute one way is not unheard of in LA County. You're exhausted. You're mentally fatigued. You are not a productive employee. You are making your company less money, and your company is a burden on taxpayer resources, is a burden on energy resources, and is spending more money to make you less productive. So we can fix that. And one of the things that'll help employers is getting on to this self-driving idea, starting to fight this, like, oh, I'm afraid of machines, or the freedom of the open road. I love hearing Joe Rogan, oh, but the freedom, and a self-driving car might one day tell me that I can't go to my favorite ice cream shop, says the guy who's doing keto. I'm just like, we need to move forward with this progress. Or you know, I was listening to Joe Rogan talk to Kevin Smith, and you're like, oh, you know, like a self-driving car's already killed a guy. And you're like, well, yeah, but humans kill thousands of people behind the wheel of a vehicle. Like, the numbers aren't even close in terms of operating time on self-driving cars and the number of people who die at the hands of human drivers. So I've already rambled on this long enough. Yeah, we should probably move on. Sorry, Kyle Ruggles. Oh, there was like a whole conversation between Aditya and Kyle Ruggles in the live chat, and unfortunately, I can't quite untangle it all while doing this live. So, another quick bit of news. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You know, I say that a lot. I say I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, and then I spend a lot of time on it. This is the news story that I'm going to talk about before talking about the Asus phone. So let's really not spend a lot of time on this. Real quick, this is a continuing story that I want to keep an eye on. But again, we're just going to be getting little pieces of information while this plays out. There is now a third class action lawsuit filed against Apple in California over MacBook Pro keyboard problems. Apple was hit with 2 class actions in May over the MacBook Pro's faulty keyboard that uses a butterfly key mechanism. Now that June has kicked in, a third class action lawsuit over the same issue was filed yesterday on behalf of Diego Benatena individually and on behalf of all others similarly situated. This is from patentlyapple.com, and I'll have links for all of these stories that we're talking about after this broadcast is wrapped up. So again, I want to point this out, not because a lot of people say I bitch about Apple a lot. I bitch about Apple a lot because I actually hold them to the standard that they claim to create. Apple sets a threshold, sets an expectation of them being a premium product with the consumer's best interests in mind, with a lot of feel-good marketing, and they've built on a reputation that I don't believe they fully fulfill today. That does not mean I would not recommend Apple products to my family and friends if I thought they were the best fit for them. There are still plenty of products that I do recommend to my family and friends. The computer lines from Apple have been very disappointing over years of Apple manufacturing. And I don't feel like this gets enough discussion because often we see the manufacturer stand in the way of properly disclosing issues, of waiting until a tipping point has been reached years after the release of that product, and we've had to play these games where owners are getting into class action lawsuits. And even when those class actions work in favor of the people who own the product, the consumers, often the requirements that Apple puts on when those class actions can be fulfilled works against the people who were early adopters. So like, say you bought a MacBook day one and you suffer from this butterfly keyboard problem, the day one, the die-hard fans of Apple products are often the ones who have the worst restrictions on actually fulfilling the class action or getting some kind of compensation for their issues. Apple quality is not poor, but Apple is a manufacturer just like any other. There is no special Apple sauce, right? So the one thing that works against Apple is they are the only ones who make Macs. So if there is an issue in the manufacturing, because there's always some kind of teething pains problem with a new line of computers, a new line of hardware, they are solely the place where you can get one. So it's not like, hey, you know what? I heard that there were some issues with this new generation of Dell computers. You know, I really need something today. Well, I guess I just have to wait for a Dell. No, you go and you look at a Lenovo, or you look at an Asus, or you look at an Acer, or you look at any other number of manufacturers, or maybe I need to buy a Surface instead of waiting for Dell to sort their problems out. I don't think that there are any specific problems with Dell that I'm referencing in this exact moment. I'm just using them as a hypothetical. You can't do that with Apple. So you will constantly be playing this waiting game. And one of the issues that I've seen since moving to Intel, every single generation of MacBook has had some kind of flaw that needed to be sorted out. Even when they would claim things like unibody construction, they would put soldering points on the screen right near the hinge so that the screen would snap. Like, that's not unibody. That's not unibody construction. So this is exactly why we need to have those conversations with our family and friends and just let them know there's nothing magic here. This feel-good notion of it just works is just marketing. And there's a reason why the top players in any given industry are not the top because of some meritocracy. They're the top because they typically are the companies who will dominate advertising in that space. Advertising works. So I'm going to continue talking about this, regardless of the people that say I'm overly cranky about Apple. I feel it's worth reiterating my credentials, as I used to be an Apple product specialist for Department of Energy facilities in New Mexico, where this was back in the Xserve days, and I would have my hands in the guts of dual core, dual socket Power Macs, and it was an exciting time to be a diehard Apple fan. And I feel like we've been steadily walking away from Apple as that kind of a dominant force in high-end computing and in premium products, like going from the G4 to the G5, like that case design and what you could do with it and the cooling zones. And it really took PC building up to a much higher level. Especially opposite, Dell servers and stuff. And back when Apple had RAID arrays that you could purchase and they were working on LightPipe, that was so exciting. I was obnoxious about being an Apple fan. But that's not the company that we're dealing with today. And I think that the company we're dealing with today is still trading on a reputation that they currently aren't fulfilling. So, from Sharil, what Juan is talking is the drawbacks of being the sole manufacturer of a platform. They get the best optimization, but they have to take the long route to get there. And not only taking the long route, it's owning the good and the bad. So if you're talking about iOS, you absolutely own one of the best ecosystems for updates, for optimization of the software directly to that hardware. That is locked down, and you can't fault Apple products for that kind of specificity, that kind of specification. But then, when there's a problem with the phone, you should have to own that. iPhone 4, antenna problems. iPhone 4S, they largely fixed them. iPhone 5, battery issues that were not disclosed by Apple until 2 years after the initial release of that phone. Wouldn't you know it, just as early adopters are probably looking at shopping the iPhone 6, which the iPhone 6, Apple was aware of the structural integrity of that phone, Bendgate, and they were also fairly aware of that structural integrity affecting screen performance, touch disease. And then getting into every successive generation of product having some issue fixed with the S series. That's the TikTok that we have with an Apple situation. But it's hard to pin them down on that because, again, usually the disclosure is years after the fact. So let's move on. Apple, apparently I'm a big ol' hater, even though I still tell my grandmother to get iPads. So there you go. Now we're getting into the good stuff. I've got the this is the Engadget look at Asus. Let's move on. Let's talk about a gaming phone. This to me is very exciting and kind of evidence of why you might not really want to be first, but here we go. Asus ROG's ridiculously high-spec gaming phone was made for PUBG. Again, this is coming from Engadget. This looks like it could be a monster handset. So not only do we have a Qualcomm 845, it's overclocked. Standard clock speed is 2.8 gigahertz. They've bumped it up to 2.96. I love it. Of course, Asus would be looking at the overclocking potential of a mobile chipset. We've got a 6-inch AMOLED display, technically 2K, but that's 2160 by 1080. It supports HDR output, but it also runs at 90 hertz. So it's not as fast as Razer's 120 hertz LCD, but it is an AMOLED. And that also means that it should be Daydream compatible too. Let's see. Then we've also got some interesting add-ons. This is all their sort of Egyptian-esque branding and just this cool look where you can fit cooling hardware on there. They've got RGB hardware on there. And then to top it all off, we've got stereo speakers, a 4,000 milliamp hour battery, and then the potential to dock and cradle. So this is looking like a pretty serious contender in mobile gaming, and it looks like Android might finally, or manufacturers might finally be taking Android seriously as some kind of mobile competitor. You know, this is a phone that looks like it's well designed to be going up against something like the Switch, and from a manufacturer that can properly support it for an ecosystem. So like I showed, like Engadget showed with their hands-on, being able to dock it into some kind of controller-like cradle so that you can hold it up and use it 3DS style. Or I saw another photo, I think this was actually from the Asus site, of there being a desktop dock. So like a Switch, you plug your phone down into something that then powers a larger monitor or a larger display. So for this is why I kind of feel companies get punished for being first. Razer was on the right track. And there were a bunch of people out there sort of picking away at, oh, well, it's not this or it's not that. It's not going to be a super popular phone. Oh, the screen's kind of dim. The cameras are awful. And the cameras weren't awful. They just weren't great. That wasn't the focus of the phone. The focus of the phone was gaming. And those things that we say we think we care about, like stereo speakers or having a larger battery or some kind of really awesome screen technology or performance, that's what they were focusing on. But they were first, so they faced the hardest brunt of criticism. And now Asus is following up on this idea, and I think we see steady improvements over what Razer did last year. So we should expect to see that from year to year. But I think they're going to benefit from a lot more positive buzz because Razer broke the idea in a more meaningful way first. And then we're going to see the next companies that focus on gaming as a platform for mobility being taken more seriously in this space. Also, apps caught up too. There wasn't a PUBG for Android when Razer launched. So there was a little confusion, like, well, what would I want a high-end gaming phone for if I'm just going to be playing Candy Crush? You know, I actually saw someone say that in a review, and you're like, I don't think you understand how this works. So not even just all of these battle royale games. If it really does have sort of like a G-Sync or a FreeSync style component to other top tier games, not just shooters, but real-time strategy, sort of dungeon crawling style adventure games, things like that could all benefit from having this kind of hardware. I'm really stoked. I'm really excited about what Asus might be able to do here, and whether or not they can take their branding and move it to other platforms, to other product lines. So ROG stands for Republic of Gamers, and that's sort of become their top tier branding for GPUs, for laptops, for even, I think they're still making, are they still making an ROG desktop? I don't remember. I'll have to ask JJ at Asus. Regardless, just like Razer has this crazy passionate fan base for their laptops, ROG has this crazy passionate fan base for gamers. So if you slap this ROG label on there and someone is already a member of Team ROG, I'll be curious to see if this moves the needle on enthusiast niche king devices. I don't believe Asus has any expectations that this is just going to blow up overnight, suddenly be a direct competitor to the Galaxy. That's not the point of making this phone. I'll be curious to see if they sustain a product line in a very well-developed and very mature market to give it time to find its legs. Future updates, an ROG Phone 2, ROG Phone 3, and then from there seeing if this is actually an idea that's taking hold beyond just the core, the most dedicated fans of gaming hardware. So this is where I'm kind of curious. I want to see what consumers have to say about focused niche king devices as phones. I think there is one stumbling block for your primary communications device also fulfilling the need of being some kind of specialty gaming or photography or content creation platform. And that's mostly phones tend to interrupt the process of focusing on a specific task, and then focusing on a specific task tends to degrade the device being a communications platform. So when I went to Vegas, I did use my V30 as my main content production platform. It did all of my script writing, voiceover recording, camera, video recording, editing, rendering in 4K, uploading to social media. I did everything from my phone, but use it as a phone. My SIM card was actually in my BlackBerry Key 1. I don't know that this experiment would have been as successful, daily vlogs from CES, if every single time I went to shoot, I was getting a barrage of emails, text messages, instant messages from the rest of the Newegg team. I think that would have been highly disruptive to the act of creating content. Also, the act of creating content would have been radically destructive to things like my battery life. So I wouldn't have been getting those updates, those notifications, those messages, those calls, those texts, and my phone would have been dead much faster. So, I still do think that there's an idea where specialty hardware kind of makes sense. Like, you might want to have a regular mid-ranger or even an entry-level phone and then focus on having a really nice portable gaming experience on something like a Switch. Like, that still, I don't think we're in any danger right away of that relationship being upset. But that's where I'm curious. Can Asus move the needle on consumers who are concerned about having everything in one device? Or will we start walking away from this and moving towards, peeling off some of these individual experiences into dedicated hardware again? You want a really nice camera. Sure, I mean, a P20 Pro might be kick-ass, but it's still not going to compete against a low-end interchangeable lens mirrorless camera or DSLR. So for the same price as a P20 Pro, you could get a really solid, decent mid-ranger and then get a really nice lens camera platform and grow over time with your photography and your video that way. So those kinds of things, I think we still have a hard conversation to have between those differing ideas. But I still think there's going to be a huge argument for individuals. One, the branding, that this is a top-tier premium gaming device because it's got that ROG label, and they might only want to make one purchase. At least it's got the battery to back up as compared to larger Android phablets from premium manufacturers still avoiding having that slightly larger battery. From Farid, Candy Crush 4K at 120 frames per second. Bam! There have been a ton of comments on this. Let me kind of scroll through up and scroll back up and see some of what you guys have been saying. From Sherrill, I am actually envious of the desktop dock. Wonder what will happen when I plug in my P20 Pro. Goran Petrovic, front speakers, 3.5 millimeter jack, 4,000 milliamp battery. I don't care for anything else, but what I don't care for will skyrocket the price. We'll have to see what premium means in the future for pricing on these things. From Mary P, they should make a transformer phone. Mary P, Asus. I'm trying to think if they ever did. I don't know so they used to have a line of transformer products. They had a tablet that had a keyboard dock, so you could use an Android tablet like a laptop. And I can't remember. I think they did make that into. They had a phone that docked into a tablet, and I think they called it the Transformer, which is hilarious. From Kyle Ruggles, any great Android games to take advantage of it? GTA 5, Shield level graphics? ? From Sherrill, replying to Kyle Ruggles, expect more Battle Royale games soon to take advantage of modern chips. Yeah, there are a bunch of these types of open combat, kill everything on site or team-based games that I think we're going to be seeing coming to a lot of these platforms. My buddy Andrew Wallace is a fan of what is it, World of Warships, I think it is, or Blitz, Warship Blitz, or something like that. It's also in the same vein as like World of Tanks. I've played those, and I've been ranking up my little battle cruiser, and it's okay. It's just not the kind of gaming that I'm super into. Sadly, I'm still grinding away like crazy on a game called Exiled Kingdoms, which is a Diablo clone with DOS-era graphics, and I kind of adore it. It's kind of amazing. And it's a one-time, you can play as a warrior class with a limited number of missions for free. Then I think it's like $4 to unlock the whole game. And so I unlocked the whole game thinking, like, I'm just kicking this developer a couple bucks because, like, I can't believe this app is still being updated. It's a really old game. And just last week, I got a notification from Google Play, like, oh, there's an update for Exiled Kingdoms. And they just enhanced the map even more. They added a bunch of missions. They added a new gladiatorial combat mode where you have to fight tigers. It's phenomenal. And it's taking me back to everything that I loved about the original Diablo and how addicted to that game I was. But that's not going to really stress the graphics prowess of something like the ROG phone. From Kyle Ruggles, buy a compact camera, better than a phone. Buy a Switch, better than a phone. Try and get a phone to do any of those better than a dedicated device. Shrugs. Juan makes a great point. I think there's going to be arguments for and against. And I think there is an argument or someone out there who's saying, like, I don't want to have to buy a Switch and buy a camera and buy a phone. I want to buy everything in one. So we'll have to see. From Didier Hernandez, it would be awesome that, as powerful as it is, the ROG Asus phone is also sort of a foundation for a productivity device. Now, this I would love to see Asus capitalize on. This is, right now, according to everything that I'm reading, could be the most powerful Android device on the market. They have an overclocked Qualcomm 845 in there. So if you piggyback on that conversation like you do with like an ROG laptop, I have actually stopped shopping. I stopped shopping mobile workstations, laptops that are built around more dedicated desktop-style computing experiences, and I've started shopping gaming laptops, where you can get like 90, or I would say like 85% of a mobile workstation grade hardware at like 50% the cost. The higher-end Intel chipsets, dedicated graphics. My current laptop is a Razer Blade, and I love that thing. That thing is going to last me so much longer than if I purchased just sort of a regular Ultrabook style laptop, because it's got much beefier specs in there. So if we can make the same conversation with the phone, and we're showing some great desktop grade connectivity, you can connect it to larger monitors. Maybe Asus bakes in some more screen awareness, so you could use like your main Android display as some kind of widget or dock center for your notifications, but then there's a completely different secondary screen, like a multi-monitor setup, but for your phone. We could see something really impressive there. And not just for gaming, but for really stepping up your phone as the brain of your mobile lifestyle. I was talking about this on the Bored at Work podcast. There's already so much you could be doing from your phone, and I don't find it to be a very compelling argument against when people say things like, oh, but your phone screen's so small, why would you want to edit video from there? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want to edit video directly from the source that captured your video? Why do you want to have to mess with managing files and moving them from camera to laptop, organizing them into folders so that your projects are clean, when the second you're done shooting something, you can drop it directly into the video editing timeline that you're already working on? That makes way more sense to me. So if Asus can show that power really does have some kind of impact on that kind of workflow, then Asus is going to crush it. But communicating that to general consumers is always exceedingly difficult. And Asus doesn't have a huge name in mobility right now. Zenphones have been great. I've had positive experiences with every Zenfone that I've used. Oftentimes it's caveated with for the price, but they've been great. So I don't see why that would be any sticking point for them. It's just the same thing that many other companies have. OnePlus is starting to figure out how to cross over into general consumers. LG and HTC super struggling with talking directly to consumers. Asus has a passionate fan base, but can they use that fan base as evangelists to spread the gospel of ROG to other people? So we'll have to see. From Edita Anil, perhaps a nude geek debate with TK and Michael Fisher. Are niche phones worth it? Well, yeah, that could be a fun conversation. Let's see. Transformers jokes. From Taki A, do you think other manufacturers will follow this move? Black Shark already starting making one with Xiaomi backup and Nubia as well. I think we'll definitely see more in here. Razer opened the floodgates. I think we're going to see specialty lines from a number of manufacturers moving forward, and it's not that difficult to cobble together something and say it's for gamers, right? So bad actors in this space will also just say like, you got some RGB on the back of your phone and it's got the top-end chipset. It's a gaming phone. The companies that I'll take seriously, though, actually will focus on that gaming experience, and they won't leave that out just to bolt something together that looks like it was, made by some Mountain Dew fueled intern in a design department. Razer, I mean, they bought out a phone company. They who was it? I can't remember the name of the company. Nextbit. They bought out Nextbit to get their phone manufacturing expertise, and then they still focused on what made their brand exciting, and that super high refresh rate is on the display is a differentiator. Asus has their own in-house phone team, and the ROG team probably just put a whole bunch of pressure on their neck to make something up to their standards. Whether or not other companies can jump in there too, like Xiaomi, who they don't have the same kind of expertise in this space for gaming, that's where we're going to have to see if a gaming brand gets diluted. Because gaming hardware in general gets diluted because so many players are just rushing to make funky looking phones, not phones with actual benefits, pros and cons. Mustafa, the ROG phone looks to me as a great implementation for a gaming phone. I think it's top of the pack now. I mean, they definitely have the right track going on. Let's see. Oh, lots of comments here. I'm gonna have to a Falcon Northwest. From Kyle Ruggles, the Homer phone. The Homer. I forget what the name of the car Homer made in The Simpsons. But yeah, Falcon West. Again, any company could reach out and develop some kind of partnership. I think we'll see the tides turn on this when a major manufacturer does something bold. Now, with all these companies looking at gaming phones, ROG, so yeah, screaming fast performance, high refresh rate display. That's a big deal for any Android device. Makes a lot of sense on a gaming device. So where will we be if HTC wants to join this conversation? So we have this whole brand at HTC, which has become the sort of bleeding edge gold standard for virtual reality. So why haven't we seen a Vive branded phone outside of just mock-ups and leaks and rumors and speculation? HTC could join this conversation with the coolest part of their brand and have something to say about mobility and virtual reality, augmented reality, how that might play into gaming too. So that to me could be really exciting also. And then where would someone like Samsung be? Samsung has been making all-rounders. The Galaxy is a good all-rounder. It's very good at basically everything you can do on it, but there aren't a lot of differentiators. That what makes a Galaxy really special for a specific consumer or specific demographic. So I think we'll see if Samsung has something to say about a high-end, high-spec, high-performance device. Where's our Samsung hot rod? That could be really cool. That could be really interesting. And that could, then I'll say, this is definitely crossed over into the mainstream. When Samsung has to take it seriously, then we've been pushed. We've pushed this idea to its ultimate limit. Yeah, lots of comments in here. So, I don't know where this conversation went off the marks, but people in the live chat talking about biting their phones. I want to cover something just really quick here because it made this like really big splash and then was almost automatically corrected. This is why we have to be careful about how we talk about like news, with everything being so pushed to leaks, rumors, speculation driving the main part of the discussion. Like we like EV leaks, we're putting so much on getting that insider info that we talk a product to death before it's even been officially announced. And then when it's officially announced, because of all the rumors and because of all the speculation, you're almost always going to be disappointed, or you're almost always going to feel unfulfilled because of how much speculation, rumor, leakage went into discussing the product before it was actually announced. So we've got to start finding some way of dialing some of that back and letting cooler heads prevail on things like keeping our expectations in check. I thought this story was a great example of that running out of control just a little bit on the negative end. And that was when Google updated their official Android website, and tablets were removed from the Android website. So this is from Android Police, and they've already updated this story. Google has been doing an impressive job of pretending Android tablets don't exist for the last few years, and now it's done pretending. Google has updated the Android website to remove the tablet section entirely. You can now use that site to learn all about Android on phones, Wear, TV, Auto, and Enterprise. That's it. RIP Android tablets. Well, that's not true. From Hiroshi Lockheimer. Oops, we had a bug when we updated the site. It's back up now. Sorry for the confusion. And Android tablets are back on the Android website. I want us to take a sec. I like the guys over at Android Police. Listen to how definite the coverage was on that omission. Google is done pretending. You can now use that site to learn all about Android on phones, Wear, TV, Auto, and Enterprise. That's it. RIP Android handsets, Android tablets. We're all like, tablet sales are kind of in the toilet. Even the iPad as a dominant force in slate-style mobile computing is even the iPad is falling prey to larger phones doing a better job of fulfilling that sort of on-the-go data consumption experience. But that doesn't mean tablets are going to completely disappear. If anything, we're just going to see them morph into, blurring the lines between phones and laptops. There will be this sort of mid-tier Venn diagram overlap of features, always on connected devices and chipsets with slightly larger screens, more computer style setups. And we have a pretty clear idea that one of the things Google might do is find a way to blend and blur Chrome OS with Android. What Fuchsia might be, and this is, we're in the wild speculation part of my podcast here, what Fuchsia might be is trying to blur those things together. Again, drawing some of the benefits of Chrome OS and adding in the app ecosystem of Android makes a lot of sense to me. In fact, I would very much like to see a manufacturer make a Chrome OS phone. I think that would be crazy exciting if we could get Chrome OS in a phone. I would leap to that over the next whatever build of Android. But I digress. This thing again, we've taken rumor milling and fear mongering and leak speculation, and we've almost weaponized it. So yeah, a bunch of people probably aren't too lit up about Android tablets right now, especially if sales are any indication. It's not super hot. But to speak with such finality about a website update as the end of an entire product line that Google supports, I feel is a bridge too far. Again, like, we should be engaged in the speculation. I would totally appreciate the clickbaity headlines. Google removes tablets from the Android website. What does this mean? Question mark. Question mark. The question mark is a big deal because it gives you buffer space as an editorialist so that when they instantly flip the tablet section back on, you don't have a paragraph on your website talking about Google's done pretending RIP Android tablets. So, this is like what we need is, what was that joke from Office Space? We need a jump to conclusions, Matt. This is like the current state of reporting in general, let alone tech reporting, where we've been kind of just telling you how you should feel about things. Yeah, I just want cooler heads to prevail. Let the information sort of resonate for a second and then see what comes of it, because this is hilarious. I love seeing stuff like this almost immediately or almost automatically get backtracked. From Blue Malicious, not a complaint, but you should definitely rename the podcast, quote, "But I digress." Yeah, I do like to go off on tangents, but I digress. So here's an interesting one. I kind of want your guys' opinions, guys and gals' opinions on this, because I'm not super into the current generation of console gaming. So let me throw this story up. This is from Windows Central. It looks like Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant are coming to Xbox One. Excuse me. We've been hearing for months that Microsoft was working on Alexa support for Xbox One, complete with voice control support via compatible Amazon Echo speakers. Today, we've seen hard evidence that not only shows Alexa support is coming, but also support for Google Assistant. Since the death of Kinect, Microsoft hasn't really provided users with a decent alternative for controlling your console via voice commands. You can use a headset to speak with Cortana, but who's wearing a headset while watching a movie when all you want to do is control the volume on your TV? The article goes on. I don't know that I love this idea. From Kyle Ruggles, Cody and now Assistant loving my new One S, his Xbox One S. So Microsoft was so way far ahead of the curve when it came to Kinect. People freaked out about the privacy implications of an always listening microphone in your living room to give commands that would report back to Microsoft servers. And then the Amazon Echo came out and everyone was like, hey, cool, now Amazon can monetize even more of my general lifestyle, daily life and behavior. I think one of the things that's bothering me on this is when I've used phones that have multiple AI components. I think, what was it, the HTC U11, I think, had HTC's own proprietary AI assistant. It wasn't an aggressive assistant, but it was sort of like a background component that would try and just figure out your general trends. Then it also had Google Assistant, obviously, because it's an Android device, and it also had support for Amazon Alexa. So with 3 different AI packages in one platform, the user has to remember what service is best for them for which interaction. And I think right now we're kind of in this arms race where these voice assistants, they're fun. I think there's a novelty there. I think they definitely do some things well in terms of these interactions. I don't think they'd be selling as well if it were only novelty. But if I have an Xbox and there's Cortana built into it for when I'm wearing a headset and doing specific things with gaming, and then there are sort of plugins or components that allow me to use Alexa or Google Assistant, that to me seems like it confuses what it is that I have an Xbox in my living room for. I don't see where it improves the Xbox experience so much other than just relying on Google's platform or Amazon's platform. Again, not that I believe someone's going to use all 3. I don't think someone's going to own an Xbox and use Cortana and Alexa and Google Assistant. It'll probably be, and I just triggered one of my phones because I said Google Assistant. It'll probably be 2. But even that to me seems like kind of a confused relationship. So you have an Echo and you talk to your Echo to do something on your Xbox. where Microsoft instead could be looking to improve the Cortana experience and provide users that sort of direct pipeline into what it is that they're trying to do on their console. That's where I'm a little lost as to why this is being reacted to so positively. So Renata Laporte, lots of people use their console as their media center, and navigating those menus can be a pain. So it's nice to have a working voice recognition system. I completely agree there, but from everything that they learned in Connect, I'm surprised that Microsoft isn't trying to improve that situation, because they're also trying to build Cortana into Windows 10, desktops and laptops. To me, that seems like that would be the better move for Microsoft and how they directly relate with their customers, not to push Xbox customers over to, oh, well, you should also just go out and buy a Google Home Mini. Now, go do that, and then the Home Mini will talk to your Xbox for controlling all these things. Like, why would I then use my Xbox as a media center instead of getting something like a Chromecast? Kyle Ruggles, media controls, that's about it. That's all I'll use Assistant for. What else could there be? Unless it ties deeply into the Xbox, but where's the line drawn then? From Aditya Anil, Kinect has the camera, now audio as well with voice recognition. It's scary. They know what we look like and how we sound. Will they soon make phone calls and purchases on our behalf as well? Yeah, actually, that's the program that Google's working on, remember? Like, they want Google Assistant to make your dinner reservations for you. From Mary P, new God of War is awesome on the PS4. We're just going to sidestep the Microsoft news, and I agree. Dad of War is pretty flipping cool. From Catherine Curridon, you triggered my Alexa too. I thought I had avoided the hot word. So my phones went off, but it wasn't that Alexa went off on anything. It was Google Assistant was going off because I said Google Assistant and not okay hot word or hey hot word. I thought I avoided saying anything that would trigger an Alexa. I apologize. Some Vinny Madrox. What if during the setup process it let you choose one of the three, then disable the other two? That could be really interesting. Again, like if you were a hardcore Alexa household and you had Echoes and you wanted to be able to simplify and streamline that to being one singular point of voice control access, I guess I understand that. I think that would be a benefit for consumers. I think what I'm confused by is why Microsoft is doing this. Because to me, that sounds like it would water down the Xbox brand. To me, that seems like a slide for the Xbox. That would remove one thing that I think would make the Xbox the dominant computing living room setup, because then it wouldn't matter that I had the Xbox. The dominant computing platform is Alexa or Google Assistant. So I don't see how this benefits Microsoft. And then some other comments here from BearPaw34. I know people turning on their Xbox because of recognition. From Cheryl, my only wish is Microsoft spread their wings for Xbox outside of certain markets. And Kyle Ruggles, they need to release a graph of which each assistant can do, what each assistant can do, and the limitations of each. Too many cooks in the kitchen. Yeah, too many. I agree. So yeah, I'll be curious to see, and especially for people who have the Xboxes, because right now I have a PS4. Actually, technically, I don't even have a PS4. My wife got a PS4 because she needs it for work. I love being able to say that. I think I need to say that more often. My wife is so awesome that she needs, not wants, not kind of, well, it would be nice to have, she needs a PlayStation for work. How cool is that? My wife rocks. Okay, so moving on. We've got two more quick stories here. It wouldn't be a Some Gadget Guy podcast if we didn't at least get a little political. And this is something that I don't think is going to surprise anyone. This is a story out of the New York Times. It's from sorry, backtracking real quick from Cheryl. Is your PS4 ... Sorry, your wife's PS4 work tax deductible? And Cheryl, I'm laughing as hard as I am because yes, it is. Literally everything we do on the PlayStation is a tax deduction for both of us. Oh gosh, I love where our jobs are at right now. Getting back to some gaming commentary and PC building commentary on Newegg. Literally everything I do with gaming and PC building, tax deductible. With my wife, the current job that she's in, even though it's more about talent, negotiations, contracts, voice actors, etc., everything she does with the PS4, tax deductible. Oh gosh, guys, I'm telling you, it's a sweet life. I'm loving it. I complain about a lot of crap. I will not complain about that. I will not complain about the current state of the awesomeness of where my wife and I are in our careers at this moment. Flippin' sweet. Okay, so some bummer news. I'm going to take a quick drink of water here real fast. No one's going to be surprised by this, but I think it's worth discussing because it's another one of those stories that, had it come out on its own, we weren't in the current political climate that we were in, this would be a huge deal story. But it's not, because it's kind of par for the course. We kind of expect it. Doesn't mean we shouldn't still be talking about it. And this is another story about Facebook, privacy, and security. From the New York Times, Facebook gave device makers deep access to data on users and friends. The first paragraph here. As Facebook sought to become the world's dominant social media service, it struck agreements allowing phone and other device makers access to vast amounts of users' personal information. Facebook has reached data-sharing partnerships with at least 60 device manufacturers, including Apple, Amazon, BlackBerry, Microsoft, and Samsung, over the last decade, starting before Facebook apps were widely available on smartphones. The deals allowed Facebook to expand its reach and let device makers offer customers popular features of the social network, such as messaging, like buttons, and address books. But the partnerships, whose scope has not previously been reported, raise concerns about the company's privacy protections and compliance with a 2011 consent decree with the Federal Trade Commission. So we're not surprised. This is another one. We'll put it in the bucket of I'm not surprised, still somehow disappointed. I recently talked about a story where Facebook had started pushing super user access on unlocked or rooted Android devices. At the same time, over these last several years, in the window of time that the New York Times is covering, and they talk a lot about BlackBerry devices and BlackBerry Hub. So that's sort of the focus that led into this disclosure, was looking at some of these previous devices that really dug deep into Facebook's second and third generation level relationships, that you could find information on people that wasn't really supposed to be public, but Facebook was giving BlackBerry Hub this wide open access to that kind of information. At that same time, we saw Facebook become one of those primary apps that would come pre-installed on devices, especially carrier-branded smartphones. So we see Facebook getting or requesting much deeper level access to your personal information on your mobile device being pre-installed on manufacturer hardware, especially carrier-branded hardware, and at the same time giving up a ton of user information to the companies that are manufacturing your smartphones and companies that sort of traffic or profit off of your data, companies like Amazon. All of these things look like they're kind of quid pro quo-y. We don't have smoking gun pieces of information to link all of this behavior together. But over the same window of time, from 2011 to now, we see this industry, this data brokerage industry, taking user data, profiting off of user data, trafficking and selling user data, and especially with Facebook being this linchpin service in that setup, all of it coming hand in hand, soup to nuts, from the individual end user consumer to Facebook, services on Facebook that got to dig into your information, manufacturers of the devices that you use Facebook on also having that same really super tight relationship. Our current political and judicial and lawmaker situation, the current legislative process that we use, is ill-equipped to handle business evolution at that speed. So corporate technology business solutions running far away from what our current set of laws, guidelines, and regulations can hope to police. Facebook, I think, is overdue some kind of regulatory action. I think they need an examination from the FTC, and I think they need examinations from lawmakers outside of just, well, we're going to drag Mark Zuckerberg before the Senate and wag our fingers at him and come up with some really pithy zingers. Like, hey, you want to tell me where you ate dinner last night, Mark Zuckerberg? Well, no, I really don't. See, I gotcha. No, you haven't done anything. This is the illusion of some kind of actual, government, taking a swing at regulating an industry. This industry is way outside of their ability to actually comprehend. I mean, for anyone who's watching this, do you really believe here in the United States that lawmakers have their fingers anywhere near the pulse of modern, current, high-end computing technology? I think not. So, I mean, the president of the United States is probably still tweeting from a Galaxy S2. So, when we're concerned about, some of the law enforcement advisories on phones manufactured in other countries, we could be concerned about governments in this space, but corporations are already playing fast and loose with protecting user data. So that's immediately, I think, to me, a more present, a clear and present concern over what's happening with our data. That to me is an immediate big deal that's not hypothetical, not speculation, and is happening right now. So we should be concerned about that. And we should have better tools as consumers to crack open the stuff that we own, to repair the stuff that we own, and to then employ the best protections that we have available to us, things like encryption and security settings, and being able to separate ourselves, if we so choose, from the services that might want to engage in predatory business practices. From the Silver Ace, he actually tweets from an unprotected iPhone, so there's that. I think in reply to Trump, I thought Trump was on a Galaxy. I thought he was on like an old busted Galaxy S2 or Galaxy S3. How hilarious would that be if he became president and then decided that the iPhone was the better fit for protecting sensitive information at the highest security levels of our government? Hilarious. Maybe he's on like an iPhone 5C. Maybe it's a hot pink. We'll start that rumor right now. Trump uses a hot pink iPhone 5C. So yeah, that's some major stuff that I think will have to lead the discussion on yet again. The geeks will have to have these conversations, because I don't believe our elected officials are really up to the task of untangling all of this just yet. And I fear more damage is going to happen before we sort this stuff out. What I hope to avoid are heavy-handed laws from legislators who don't understand this stuff getting in the way of future products and services. But that doesn't mean we back off and let this stay completely wide open, deregulated, and potentially harming consumer information. So we'll have to see. Mary P. Pink with some bling. That might be Melania's iPhone that he's just using to get messages out there. I don't know. Has she been found yet? Has Melania been found? Is there a watch going on for something? I don't know. We'll see. I just wanted to touch on this real quick. This is from timescall.com. I'm pulling up the Reddit just to abbreviate some of this. Polls show that over 80% of Republicans support net neutrality, while Democrats' support is even higher, because almost everyone knows that the internet is a prime part of our constitutional right to free speech. And then from the actual story, this is timescall.com. Or are you going to actually load the webpage? I should have preloaded this. This is now terrible podcasting right now, and I'm still just vamping to talk about stuff. They might be getting the Reddit kiss of death right now. This looks like not the most stable website, so we're going to bail out of that. I'll have a link to there. Sort of just talking about some of the issues, Obama instituting net neutrality as a policy, or 300 million Americans in this country. Ajit Pai, former counsel for Verizon, is trying to strike this all down, blah, 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 blah. Bringing this up now because technically, I believe if I have this process down, if I understand, because we talked about the Senate instituting a specific examination of the repeal of net neutrality.
And it got the votes. So we got those votes. We managed to land 3 Republicans in that action. And then that vote moves to the House. So the House is now going to go through a very similar bureaucratic process, which takes a really long time. But I believe while the House is engaged in that process, that the repeal of net neutrality regulations, Title II regulations, will still go into effect on the 11th. So in a week. So I think that's the process. If that gets recalled, then if it gets recalled by the House, then something actually gets put forth before the president, and the president has to sign off on it. So I seriously doubt the president's going to sign off on not repealing net neutrality. So I think it's pretty much a done deal at this point, but we're still going to go through this process. It puts Senate and congressional members on notice. This is not a very controversial policy. In the way that we would regulate power, water, telephones, we should be regulating the internet as a telecommunications service. That's not how we regulate content on the internet, which the government currently doesn't seem particularly interested in stepping on unless it's some kind of severe violation of, consumer protections. Or of minors, the government should get involved if they find child porn somewhere, right? So no one's conflating that with Comcast shouldn't be able to throttle Netflix. Completely separate issues. So, we see this evidence time and time again. If you're a real conservative and you care about free and open markets and you want the best possible competition for services on the internet, then yeah, you should be in favor of Title II regulation. Also, if you're a liberal and you're in favor of better competition for services to get you on the internet, then we should be in favor of deregulating city and state laws that prevent competition in your area, which far and away have the support of telecommunications giants like Verizon and Comcast. So we're mostly in agreement here. There are very few people in this who are really invested in this conversation who feel counter to these arguments. Again, this is not a very divisive statement. This is not a very divisive issue. A very small minority of people who are involved in this conversation are against Title II regulation of the internet as a telecommunications service. So we need to keep having this fight, and we need to keep having this conversation because it's going to flip-flop again when we get a liberal administration into power. It will probably see some traction on this if we see any movement in the 2018 midterms. In a couple months, we're going to be going to the polls for House and Senate seats. And if we see any kind of liberal momentum there, this will be something that gets brought up in the discussion again, and whether or not we can entrench it in a better action than how the OIO was instituted in the first place. We're going to see states enacting their own individual laws for net neutrality, which so far are more severe than what the FCC was trying to create under create under the original OIO, Open Internet Order. So, if I were a telecommunications company, I would actually prefer having the FCC's regulations in place than New York State and California State's regulations. But that would require some kind of long-term foresight and lobbying effort for the more lax regulations, the basic Title II protections of the OIO. But instead, we're seeing this entire lobbying effort trying to gut the whole thing, which is then just going to create a backlash, which is going to be worse for them in the long run. Again, if I needed any more evidence to point to companies like Comcast being really bad at their jobs, that would be it. Spending this much money and wasting this much in taxpayer cash to keep going down these avenues of defeat makes me not impressed with how they conduct themselves and how they do business. So there you go. Let's see. I've got a couple comments here. Anyone who's watching my podcast now here commenting on this stuff is probably, I'm preaching to the choir. But again, the reason why I bring this up is we need to keep leading these conversations with our family and friends. Right? We need to keep hosting these, and we also need to be good resources for information. If someone has questions, that we don't just shame them. Oh, you're not for net neutrality? Are you stupid? I get to say that. But then you can take what I say, soften the edges on it, and present that in a way that your family and friends might appreciate better. Because again, this affects them too. If you're a conservative and you gut basic protections for telecommunication services, what happens when a liberal administration might have leverage over that control? Right? You know, like maybe conservative sites need to be throttled more aggressively than liberal sites. You know, I mean, there's the fear mongering that goes right back to what it is that they claim the government's trying to do and is completely ineffective at, right? You know, we have this conversation. The government's totally ineffective. Okay, so then why are you afraid of a tiny, underfunded regulatory agency like the FCC? Oh, well, they're going to throttle all of our sites. How? Either government is ineffective or it actually does listen to the will of the people. And I think there's way more evidence to show that government changes with the opinions of the populace. You voted in Obama, we got net neutrality. We voted in Trump, and they're trying to get rid of net neutrality. Corporations don't listen to citizens, but politicians still kind of have to occasionally consider the whim of the people. From Farid, I want to say something, but I'm not American. Farid, join those conversations in your local areas. We talked, I think last week, where Canada was enshrining net neutrality into policy. Numerous countries throughout the EU, especially with this whole new, you're getting all those emails about revising user licensing agreements and terms of service. So many more countries are way ahead of the discussion on this than the United States. Join those conversations in your local area. Don't wait for the United States to screw this up. Don't wait for us to break it and then have to fix it. Get ahead of the discussion in your own communities. From BearPaw34, the House will take forever. And not only is it going to take forever, but it's going to be a non-issue anyway. Again, like I said, this isn't going to delay anything as far as I'm aware of. That Ajit Pai's order to remove the OIO is going to go through regardless of what the House is currently working on. So this isn't a stay of execution, but it will force, if the House somehow manages to pull this out, it will force something to happen on Trump's desk. But again, I seriously doubt Trump's going to sign it. From Fat Produce, the president would rather divorce his wife than defy the ISP lobbyists. There's so many jokes in there potential jokes in there about Trump and his fidelity and wives and mistresses and lobbyists. I don't even know where to begin. So I'm just going to let that one go. If you've got a good Trump joke as, comparing Melania to lobbyists, drop it in the comments and I'll follow. I'll let you guys be funnier than me. From Mark Schwakoffer, I've mispronounced your name, Schwakoffer, I don't know, I'm sorry. They need to give the FCC more power to enforce whatever net neutrality. It's not necessarily about giving the FCC more authority. I actually don't want the FCC to have more power than what the OIO would grant them, but I want that power enshrined with the proper legislation and the proper review from the judicial system to make sure that power is constitutional, so that we don't play this back and forth game with conservative administration trying to get rid of net neutrality, liberal administration trying to enact net neutrality, when a vast majority of people who weigh in on this issue are for net neutrality. Again, it's like there are so many of these divisive political topics. This is the one that I feel confident, I feel like I have enough expertise to properly discuss. So many of these divisive issues at the political stage where a vast majority of the citizenry are either for something or against something, but it's the whims of these politicians that are butting heads against different lobbying efforts, creating a controversy. Title II regulation, really, when you look at it, light touch FCC regulation, the ability for the FCC to come in and say, Comcast, you shouldn't throttle. Or Comcast, you know what, you shouldn't charge some people way more for some things and other people way less for other things. Like, that's like the bare minimum basic idea of how we should be doing business on the internet. So I don't want to give the FCC more power than that. I just don't want us to keep playing this fake debate game of whether or not the FCC should have this power at all. And Ajit Pai's arguments against net neutrality are wholly and completely specious and patently untrue. Oh, where were the violations to net neutrality before they enacted it into legislation? I have a blog post on SomeGadgetGuy.com with, I think, over 24 examples of how ISPs and cell phone companies got in the way of products and services, throttled products and services, forced some companies, extorted money out of some companies, and still throttled their bandwidth. I mean, there's a huge laundry list that is available to you on an easy Google search that this is a problem and has been a problem and does nothing to affect competition at the state and local level. So before net neutrality was enacted, did we see more ISPs in your area trying to compete for your dollar, or fewer ISPs in your area compete for your dollar? Net neutrality has no effect on whether or not you can take your money, vote with your wallet, and go to another business for your broadband connectivity. This has nothing to do with it. It's just conflating the issue with other problems. I agree with a lot of libertarians and conservatives that we would not need any kind of net neutrality policy if every American in this country had true competition for real broadband services. But that's a magical unicorn fairy tale world to live in, just like when libertarians complain about socialists and communists living in some kind of Star Trek utopian fantasy. That's living in some kind of Ayn Randian fantasy world that won't exist either. So reality is somewhere in the middle, and that's where we need to hash out our differences. From BearPaw34H, I have a confession. I'm conservative. BearPaw, I don't have issues with conservatism. I have issues with the current implementation of republicanism. Because right now, that's not conservative. You know, giving up huge tax breaks to multi-billion-dollar companies that are now gutting jobs and moving things overseas and trying to get rid of environmental protections because, like, we need more poisoned water in our communities and worse air. Trying to subsidize coal and nuclear, right? Come on now. Where's all the growth? Where's all the money? Look at Texas. Texas is making a grip of cash with wind and solar, and they're not getting crazy subsidies like oil and coal. So that's better business. That's making more money. I'm a capitalist at heart. I want more money, and we're leaving a ton of money on the table, taking a bunch of money out of our national coffers and giving it to industries that are not progressing and not improving. So that, to me, sounds like the worst social welfare program we've ever created. That's welfare. That's welfare for the rich and the entitled. And we're fine with that in the current GOP administration. But if we were real cloth coat Republicans, you know, talking about business, not social policy, but the Barry Goldwater era of financial conservatism, I think we'd be doing a lot better off as a country right now, because we wouldn't be dumping a ton of money at these lopsided initiatives supporting the winners of entrenched oligopolies and duopolies and monopolies in some areas. Let's see. Oh, I've got tons of comments here. Woof. Monopoly. From Renato Laporte, ISIS. ISIS is an example. Ask T-Mobile and AT&T. What is it? Was it? I think Sprint was the one that stood out. So I thought it was the major companies were AT&T and Verizon, and T-Mobile was on board, but I don't think they were part of the initial initiative. But I never want us to forget that AT&T and Verizon created ISIS. ISIS, the mobile payment platform that stood in the way of Google developing Google Wallet, not the terrorist organization ISIS, but it was a terrible name. But look at what happened there. Again, they stood in the way of another service on the internet. They halted it. They throttled it. They prevented their security chips from working in their phones from working with the service. And then Apple Pay came out. Great. That sucks. And then also someone else bringing up Archer, and I thought that was hilarious that Archer, they never really addressed it like I wanted them to. From Goran Petrovic, too bad Sweden and Norway have terrible climate and very few sunny days. There's so many of those social initiatives that I look at what they're doing in the Northern European countries, and I wish Americans could look at that and look at some of the things that are working and maybe some of the things that aren't working. Americans, we should be really good at stealing ideas from other countries And that's something that I think America has sort of lost some of its flavor for, some of its taste for. We should be able to look at Canada's healthcare system and England's healthcare system and say like, well, okay, well, what doesn't work there, but what can we learn and what can we bring over here and make things better? Instead, we've got politicians running these fake debates saying, oh, we can't make it perfect, and one person in Poughkeepsie might abuse the system, so nobody gets an improvement. And that's unsustainable. That's dumb. That's dumb politics. Oh, from BearPaw34. Okay, Juan, you went there. Okay, with business part, I agree. Yeah, see, again, that's where the reality debate needs to happen. And this is why I am so excited. Sorry, we're going to talk about politics for just a little bit here. This is why, a little bit, like I haven't been talking about politics for the last 20 minutes. This is where I'm really excited about the conversation happening between some of the younger, more passionate, Bernie, social democrat liberals, and the more aggressive libertarian style conservatives, because both of those are fantasy worlds, but both of those are aspirational. They're both aspiring to create some kind of utopian society. They're looking at what the best of us could be if we valued the labor and initiative of the individual in libertarianism, or we valued how the lowest amongst our ranks are treated under some kind of socialist or communist style regime on the liberal side. In our current world, neither of those can really exist. They're both unicorn puke fantasies. But if we were working towards the best of our ideologies, if we were working towards the most aspirational and inspirational of our ideologies, and then we found compromise between those two teams of people, we met in the middle from there, we would have, I think, the best recipe for progress. That, I think, would be the best benefit in our political system. Instead, when we look at the more center-right Democrats being in charge of the conversation, and we look at the whack job crazies and the conservative and the GOP side leading the conversation, we're playing to the worst of American philosophy and American policy. And that's a recipe for disaster. That's how you crumble the American empire, right? It's not going to come from some outside force, beating us down with some kind of military might. It's going to come from inside, rotting us at the core, and then that rot spreading throughout our daily lives. So that's why I get so cranky about some of the conservative talking points. And I should preface, they're not really conservative talking points. It's more the GOP talking points, because I don't think they really reflect true conservatism. I want to make money. I want to make a lot of money. I want to be comfortable. I want to have a good nest egg. I want to be able to provide for my family and maybe also leave a little for my future generations in my family. I'd be able to spread that on. There are so many things I identify with and appeal with in some of this conservative language, but I also don't want that to be at the expense of services for the poor, healthcare, infrastructure, and things that would really benefit the daily lives of most Americans. And that's where we have a debate. And that's where we should be able to work this out. But our current leadership is having a reality TV debate about having a real debate of substance or a conversation on these products. None of them really seem particularly interested in solving these problems. So anyway, yes, I've discussed politics far too long. Some things that are coming up on the channel, like I said, today, come hell or high water, finishing off my LG G7 camera review, 20-minute review on the standard and wide angle cameras on the LG G7. And then immediately I'm jumping right into talking about the OnePlus 6. I already have some of my sound samples recorded for the headphone and speaker playback, so that'll also be going to the Patreon pretty quick. But right now, I just kind of want to open it up if there are any other questions that you guys have or other things that are happening in the news, because I promised that I wouldn't do a 2-hour podcast, and now it's 1 hour and 45 minutes because I always manage to find a way to keep rambling on in my show that is now called But I Digress. And some other people talking about politics. I know Kyle Ruggles. I always appreciate you joining the conversation from Canada. Kyle Ruggles is a phenomenal photographer up in Canada, and I just love getting into conversations with him. And you should also check out some of his photo work. He's got a great eye for composition. But I always value that kind of insight, because I think we've made a number of moves in this fear of not ending up like Canada that I still question, like, what would be so bad if we looked at something Canada was doing and then we figured out a way to apply it to the current American United States way of doing things. I don't know. From Fat Produce, any plans on getting a BlackBerry Key 2? I am super excited about the BlackBerry Key 2. I have reached out to BlackBerry. This might be a phone I just buy for myself if I can't get a review unit, but I don't know that I'll be right on the pulse of the release for when reviews are coming out. From Mark Schwakafer, when is the Z Force 3 coming out? That's another one. I actually just reached out to one of my Motorola contacts about their G6, the Moto G6. I don't know when we might see the next Z series phone coming out. I have a buddy who's really into Moto mods, so hopefully we'll see some kind of traction on what they're doing there soon too. It would be nice to see one last generation of Moto mod compatibility before I think they would have to change the format, the shape of their phones. All of the trends are pointing away from Moto's current build. Like, how do you do an all front face screen phone and build in stuff on the back of your phone for Moto mods and still have fingerprint sensors? So they've got some things to sort out, unless they're ahead of the curve on under the glass fingerprint sensors, which would be awesome. Like, there are some opportunities there, but again, I'm really anxious to see what Moto's going to do for their next generation flagship. Talking about the Key 2, check your Twitter mentions from Sharil. I will check those out. I haven't even, I see I've got a bunch of tweets coming in too. I haven't been able to get to them. And then other people talking about what nationalities and what countries people are coming from. From Aditya, with mobile hardware cooling solutions also take after PC cooling like active water cooling or fans. Oh, I'm sorry. Will mobile hardware cooling solutions also take after PC cooling like active water cooling or fans? So they already have been. A lot of phones utilize special heat pipes and what is it? Some kind of like a vaporizing technology where as the CPU starts running, there's a special chamber in your phone which helps dissipate that with material that heats up. Not just like a copper piping, but like an actual, not like a fluid. I want to say one of the first was the Lumia 950 XL. Someone please correct me on that. But there have been some initiatives like that. I'll be really curious to see how Asus manages their ROG phone, because they are going to have an accessory with an active cooling solution that clips onto the back of that phone. And then I've been a longtime user of things like laptop cooling pads and cooling stands, so active fans that help just move air around things that are really hot that tend to also just sit on surfaces where heat can collect and heat can build up. So So that's something that I hope we'll see improvements on. And I think we will see more manufacturers making things like that. Like, I think Dex is a great example of something that needs an active cooling solution. You cradle your phone, it's powering a desktop-style experience. There should be fans on that. Like, you should be keeping your phone cool because it's also charging the battery. Speaking of battery, from Hadi Tamimi, wouldn't gaming phones benefit the most out of hot swappable batteries? Why isn't that making a return, especially when water resistance isn't even considered on gaming phones? I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you. It's something that is going to be a very difficult talking point on my OnePlus 6 review. It's a glass-backed device without wireless charging or without enhanced water resistance. So other than just making it pretty and shiny and flashy, why are we making a phone out of glass? Also, I never use my OnePlus 6 without the sandstone back. This is a OnePlus sandstone. I like sandstone, so I'm going to use it that way. I love the grip on this. I really like this. There's no like drop or shock protection. I'll still crack the back glass if I drop this with this, but I'm far less likely to drop this phone because the case is made out of a material that it feels really nice in the hand because it's not made out of razor blades or rusty rebar, but it's grippy and it's got a nice texture to it. But I digress. No, I would like to see swappable batteries make a return, but if they can't, what I hope we'll see is a manufacturer that actively courts easy battery replacement. So maybe you can't swap your battery in the field, but like on some of the older Lumias that didn't have removable backs, it would be like 2 Torx screws and you could pop the back off the phone and very easily replace the battery in that chassis. That's something that I would really like to see return. Is don't make it so I have to like get a hairdryer and melt adhesive and delicately peel fragile, brittle glass off the back of my phone to get to something that should be pretty easy to replace, like a battery. From Cheryl, hey, this is some WWDC news that I think a lot of people will be excited by. iOS 12 will get grouped notifications, like how Android has had it for years. Notifications on iOS 11 were fundamentally broken. So iOS 12 allowing us to collect notifications, how iOS users... Again, you must not get very many notifications on your phone if you've been fine with how iOS does that. So that's a huge improvement. That'll be very exciting to see. From Aditya, I heard that the Galaxy S5 was waterproof and had swappable batteries. Why don't more phones try that approach now? Because it wasn't very good water resistance. The way that the back clipped onto that generation of Samsung device was very easily defeated by very shallow drops. So like you could drop a Galaxy S5 from knee height onto carpet and sometimes pop some of the back open. I agree from a durability standpoint, a fully removable back is actually a benefit because the force of the drop causes the battery to pop out the back as opposed to the force of the drop causing the back glass to shatter from stuff on the inside of the phone shifting around, or the force of that drop being focused through your screen and your back glass. But that's really not good for water resistance. So sealing the phone makes a lot of sense if you're trying to make that water resistant. What doesn't make sense to me is sealing the phone and then making the back of the phone out of something that's brittle and easy to crack. Because again, once you get into a drop, you've instantly defeated the water resistance. So what was the benefit? And I don't have a good answer for that. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I will be checking out some WWDC stuff. I don't know that I'm going to be producing a whole lot on Apple's developer conference, but we might talk about it maybe next week. Or at least over like the Board at Work podcast, something like that. We'll have a chat about some Apple news coming up soon, I'm sure. So, folks, again, just those that last bit of housekeeping. We have a new episode of the Geek Book Club, revisiting one of my favorite stories, Star Trek: The Next Generation novels, expanding the Star Trek: The Next Generation universe. You can catch that on the YouTubes, and it will be updating on the RSS feed for the Geek Book Club either tonight or tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that with my buddy Andrew Wallace, my amazing, illustrious co-host for that show, also posts as @FatProduce. And then my G7 camera review out today, OnePlus 6 audio review probably out later this week, and just some other fun stuff that I'm going to be looking at. I'm going to try and do an editorial on why I left Pocket now. So that might show up on the YouTube channel this week too. So be on the lookout for that commentary too. I've been getting a lot of questions about why I've been making some of these transitions. And lastly, don't forget, Computex is going on this week, so there's going to be some Computex news heading to various channels, and we're going to be talking a lot about some of that news when we get to Newegg Now this Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific, where I host a fun show about PC building and gaming with my co-host, Trisha Hirschberger, and she's kind of awesome. But I did kick her ass bad at Street Fighter 2, so that was fun. Usually she rocks me. She's a better gamer than I am in almost every single game. But with a controller and not with an arcade stick, I rocked her at Street Fighter. So it was a big proud of me moment because it's so very rare that there will be a game I can beat Trisha at. So that was happy for me. All right, folks, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internets. I'm at SomeGadgetGuy on the Twitters, on the Instagrams. I have a Facebook page. I don't really use it for a whole lot, but you can find me there too if you absolutely want to have those conversations with me there too. SomeGadgetGuy.com, that's the main site where I kind of collect all this stuff, and then be on the lookout for Newegg, a couple other things I've got coming up on the podcast. And lastly, supporting production, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. That's where all of the camera and audio reviews from my gadget coverage will be headed to for the future. Thanks so much for watching. I will catch you all next week on the next episode. Oh, wait, no. Next week, I'm actually going to be on at E3. I may or may not catch you next week on the next episode of the SGGQA podcast, the Monday Morning Tech Chat. Be well and have some fun with your awesome gadgets and electronics, and I'll talk to you soon.